Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 25 on Weimar, Germany and the rise of the Nazi Party. And this one, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the German people's standard of living, 1933 to 1939. In other words, did the measures that Hitler and the Nazi Party introduced, did they make people's lives better? Did they make people feel happier? If you remember video 24, the previous video, we saw that unemployment did come down. So therefore more German people were in work. Did that have a positive effect on their standard of living? That's what this video is all about, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there is a big debate about this amongst historians, and it's possible to look at both sides of the argument. You can say, yes, in some ways the standard of living improved and went up, but equally you can say, no, in some ways their standard of living declined and did not improve. I'm going to show you both sides so that you're aware of it and you could answer both sides if it came up in an exam question. Let's start with an important thing, work, jobs. As you know, more people were in work. Therefore, they had a regular income. It led to a rise in the standard of living for some people. If you'd been unemployed in 1931 and now you've got a job in 1934, your standard of living will be better. So for many people, you can argue straight away that the standard of living had improved. But not all. What about the Jews? They were effectively removed from the workplace. What about some women who had to give up their jobs? What about their standard of living? And what about those people who were forced to work in the RAD? Remember that sort of almost like forced work from the previous video. Many of them did not enjoy their jobs. So if they're not enjoying work, is their standard of living better? Is it a better life for them? You have a think about that. Now let's turn to the important one of wages, money. That's why people work, to actually get the money. Now we have to say, wages did increase. 1932, just before Hitler came to power, on average 86 marks. That increased to 109 marks. So therefore, there is an increase in the wages being paid. On the whole, wages did increase compared to 1933 when Hitler took over. 1934, 6% rise. By 1936, a 9% rise. By 1939, a 20% rise in wages compared to 6 years earlier. 1/5 extra in your pay packet. So you can argue there that their standard of living has gone up because they've got more wages. But, there's always a but, ladies and gentlemen, at the same time, the price of goods went up. And overall, from 1933 to 1939, the prices went up about 20%. So maybe their standard of living hasn't improved that much. Yes, they've got more money, but the prices of goods have risen. So they need to use that money to buy the buy the goods. So, for some people, high earners in particular, yes, their standard of living did rise. But maybe for the lower earners, maybe they struggled. So again, that idea of winners and losers. Here's another thing to think about. Wages that were paid were linked to the hours of work worked. In 1933, when Hitler took charge, on average, people worked about 43 hours per week. By 1939, that had risen to about 48 or 49 hours, a 5 or 6 hour increase in the time that you were spending in your work. Does that mean your standard of living has gone up? Yes, you've got more money, but you're working longer. Yes, you've got more money, but prices have gone up. So it's winners and losers. Now, to try and improve the standard of living, the Nazi Party introduced three things, three measures, three organisations. And I'm quickly now just going to talk you through the three main measures, organisations, and have a look at what they did. The first one, the Labour Front, led by a Nazi called Robert Ley, L-E-Y. The Labour Front. Sometimes in the exam, you might just see it mentioned as DAF. Now, what was this all about? If you remember, one of the things Hitler did when he had the power from the Enabling Act was he banned trade unions because he thought that they were linked to the Communist Party, which he saw as a threat to his power, his control. So with trade union banned, Hitler then set up, if you like, the DAF, the Labour Front, almost like the Nazi trade union, which workers would have to join. Now, the DAF is supposed to look after the rights of workers, for example, their wages, hours. But remember, it's run by Nazis who are loyal to Hitler. It's run by Nazis who want Germany to do well. Therefore, in negotiations, yes, they're supposed to be supporting the workers, but at the same time they want what's best for the country. So therefore, would this DAF Nazi trade union be as good, be as strong, be as independent as the previous trade unions? Probably not. An example, strikes were not allowed, strikes were banned. We've already seen an increase in the hours of week that people had to work. So the DAF was supposedly set up to protect the workers' rights. But did it? I'll leave you to think about that. The second organisation, Strength Through Joy. You might see it in the exam as KDF, Strength Through Joy. Now, this was set up by the Labour Front, looking after the workers, remember, and its aim was to improve leisure time. So the KDF, the Strength Through Joy, they organised trips, lectures, visits to the theatre, sporting activities, hikes, holidays. They're providing a service for the workers. Now, here's a couple of examples for you. 2.5 million workers visited German museums. 11 million German workers visited the theatre. 700,000 went on holiday. Now, there were some absolutely top quality holidays, for example, going on a cruise, but not that many workers actually got the top prize. But they were rewarded and they were given cultural visits. So I suppose you could say there, maybe the KDF, the Strength Through Joy, has tried to improve the standard of living. Now, Hitler asked Volkswagen, a German car company, to design a people's car. Volkswagen actually means, Volk means people, Wagen means car, a people's car. Now, it was designed by Porsche and they came up with the Volkswagen. Now, the Strength Through Joy, the KDF, said, right, we will organise a scheme. And the workers said, right, if we put 5 marks a week into like a savings club, then eventually you will get a Volkswagen. You are saving for your car. That is a good scheme. That's a good idea. One of my favourite bands, ladies and gentlemen, a band called Madness. I like driving in my car, da 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 da. It's not quite a Jaguar, da 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 da. No, it's not a Jaguar, it's a Volkswagen. But this scheme, did it drive the economy forward? Sorry about that. Or were people left stuck in second gear? Right, no more. I apologise for some terrible car jokes there. But this scheme to save for a Volkswagen, it was a good idea in theory, and people did start to save. But some historians have suggested it was a cheat, a con, a swindle. as Hitler and the Nazis moved more towards war, by 1938 the car factories were changing production, moving away from cars and moving to military production, tanks, etc. When they exchanged and swapped to military, by 1939, start of Second World War, not one German worker got a car. Not one German worker got a Volkswagen. And the money was not returned. So the idea was good, save for a car and have a better standard of living, but that scheme doesn't seem to have delivered its promise. Winners and losers. The third organisation, ladies and gentlemen, Beauty of Labour, sometimes known as SDA. Now, what was the aim of this third organisation? Well, it's a simple one. What they were trying to do was produce better facilities at work for the workers. Now, you might think, brilliant, that's a good idea. What sort of thing? Better toilets, better changing rooms, better meals in better canteens, build a swimming pool, introduce better lighting, try to reduce the noise. So they were, again, had the intentions of trying to improve the standard of living for the German workers. So that's good. So there we see the three organisations. All three, allegedly, were there to improve the standard of living for German workers. I said at the start of the video, there's a debate. There's two sides of the story. Well, here we are. Now we can get right down to the nitty-gritty. First of all, the good side, the good impact for German workers. Let's have a look at them. 1, there were more jobs. People were in full employment. There is no doubt that there were jobs for German people. Secondly, the KDF, strength through joy. Yes, leisure and culture were improved. People did go on the visits. Thirdly, the SDA, beauty of labour. Yes, in the factories, better work conditions were created. Tick, tick, tick. You could argue the standard of living has been improved. On the other side, though, the negative. Maybe things weren't as good. Here are some bad points to consider. Remember, the Labour Front, DAF, no strikes. You can't strike for more pay. You were working longer hours. You could not negotiate. You had to take what the DAF presented. Maybe not as good. As regards strength through joy, the KDF, only a few ever got the real top luxury holidays. Most got cheap tickets. And then, of course, remember the Volkswagen swindle, the cheat. People had saved up but never got their car and never got their money back. And finally, the beauty of labour, the better working conditions. Yes, better working conditions were created, but it caused resentment. And why would that be? Well, here's a couple of points that I didn't tell you. Have a think about them now. Number 1, the workers had to do the improvements themselves, after work, in their own time, for no extra pay. And in many cases, they were forced to volunteer to do this extra work, otherwise they would face the threat of losing their job. So it's maybe not quite as good as it seemed. There's the three Nazi organisations. Just to finish, let's have a look at some other groups of society, some other groups of workers. Number 1, the farmers. They had always been very strong supporters of Hitler. The Nazi slogan, blood and soil. Now, the Nazi Party wrote off some debts for the farmers. So that's a good point for them. Remember what I said earlier in the video? The price rises, so the farmers are able to sell their produce at a higher price and make more profit. So that's good for them. But, again, winners and losers. because there were more jobs now in the city, and some of them paid better than in the countryside, some people left the countryside, stopped working for the farmers, and went and took the jobs in the city, and that created a shortage of labour for the farmers. Winners and losers. Another group, small businessmen. Again, they had supported Hitler. Hitler had promised, the Nazis had promised to stop the march, the domination, the takeover of real big businesses, big department stores. So the smaller businesses say, yeah, we'll vote for Hitler. And here, the Nazi Party, they did keep their promise because they passed laws which limited the size of the shop. So small business, you could argue, did benefit. Their standard of living did rise. The final group, big business. Some big business people had really supported Hitler and backed him with money on his rise to power. Can you remember why? Bonus points if you said because they feared the communists and they feared losing all their land and their business and their profits. So they had supported Hitler. Did it pay off? Yes, it did. They got even richer under Nazi rule. Remember, there's no trade unions now, so there's no strikes. So the bosses of the big business, they can award the contracts that they thought would maximize their profits. Also, as the Nazis start the process of rearmaments, there's huge contracts and there's huge profits to be made there. So big business did very well. One example, IG Farben, F-A-R-B-E-N. They did very well from the Nazis. And just to sort of finish, and maybe not surprise people, the average salary of the managers, the bosses, went up 70% under Nazi rule, 1934 to 1938. So big business, their standard of living did improve. So, ladies and gentlemen, there we have it. Standard of living. A mixed picture. Please remember to write both sides if you're asked about that in an exam. So, the last couple of videos, we've seen unemployment and we've seen standard of living. Generally a positive message. The final two videos of the course, we're going to look at how Hitler and the Nazis treated minorities. And maybe there the message is a little bit different. As ever, I hope this has been useful. I'll speak to you soon. All the best now.